Hello, this is Christina Folkestad, and you're listening to Astro Modern Mystics. And this is going to be the first English episode. And yeah, it's super excited to be sharing some of this wisdom with the English speaking community because a lot of them have asked me about that. And a lot of my Norwegian followers understand English. So I think it's really cool to invite some English speaking people. And it's such an honor to have you here, Brandon. You've been an amazing influence in my life. Going back to 2021, when I was in the 13, I even have 13 tattooed on my hand. That was a huge impact on me. Just like that, going through that self-inquiry process and just like really activating some of those spiritual gifts. So thank you for being here. Maybe you want to share a little bit about what you're up to, like German new medicine. I kind of circled back. Funny that your new offering is called the Circle because we've been like haven't had that much contact the last few years, and then it's called the Circle, and I'm still back to because my education is in public health and I trauma and this tool, German new medicine, is just like for me, it's just like a new. I don't know enough about it. You're more of an expert on it than me, but it's just I think it's the new paradigm. It's revolutionarying the way we look at disease and symptoms and
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm really happy to be here, and I love that you have 13 tattooed on you. I definitely have 13 tattooed on my heart and soul with just the wisdom of that time period. It was such a fun time, and
yeah.
I think what German New Medicine did, with the context of the 13 too, is it took a lot of general concepts. Like a lot of people will throw around the word trauma, will throw around the word stress. And sometimes those will be confused and conflated. People will call general stress trauma or, an acute moment of trauma, stress. And German New Medicine doesn't just give us a language, but I feel like it's kind of elevating the standard of healing, the healing space, because it's not just an approach that scientifically proves that the root cause of 98%, 99%, especially of chronic conditions, begin in the psyche. And it's different than psychosomatic. We'll talk about that as well. We'll make that distinction. That the psyche is first impacted with something we call a biological shock, then the brain, then the organ. And that Dr. Hammer found that to be the case 100% of the time without exception, or with over 40,000 brain scans. And Dr. Sasha, who's trained by Dr. Hammer, is one of my mentors. He's done thousands of brain scans as well, and it's 100% accurate in the sense that when someone is reporting a symptom, the part of the brain that governs that organ, that germ layer, whatever's going on, it could be a skin rash, inflamed liver, whatever it is, the part of the brain that governs that area has this circular imprint on it. And if you interview them, you can find right before that imprint, which we call a DHS or a hammer foci, there was a biologically shocking event. What does that mean? A shocking event that alters your biology. Your biology says, hey, turn on an adaptation to help this organism survive or reproduce, those are the two drivers of biology. So we are just putting cause and effect in their proper places. You go, the cause, there are three exceptions, okay? Physical trauma, if I knock someone over the head, that's not from their psyche, right? If someone is being starved of vital nutrients, they can be starving to death. That's not originating in the psyche. And poisoning, if someone chugs gasoline, they're going to have a poison response. Doesn't matter what's happening in the psyche. So outside of those three things, which we can, especially in my direct experience, I can rule out, again, that's why I say 98%. Majority of the people that come in with chronic conditions, they're not being poisoned. It's not physically induced, and they're eating just fine. In fact, a lot of them are eating incredibly healthy, and they're even more sensitive, right? So with German New Medicine, again, putting cause and effect in their proper place, we can actually get to the root cause issue, um, and then let everything else have its own place. Herbs have their place. Things like breath work have their place. Things like Even just traditional mindset work has its place. Things like tapping and energy work and whatnot, they all have their place. But
Yeah.
once we start seeing, oh wow, when we get to the root cause of this shocking, very specific, shocking event to that person and resolve it, and their body no longer sees it as a threat, healing happens.
Yeah.
And so it's just extraordinary because it's really the opposite of Western medicine, but it's not opposite in the way that Eastern medicine is also kind of opposite of Western medicine. Eastern medicine is about preventing. German medicine isn't about preventing, it's about understanding and responding to shocks in a way that gives you a kind of self awareness, but also completely changes your relationship to symptoms. Because obviously, in German New Medicine, we celebrate when we have symptoms versus think there's something wrong. So there's a lot there, but yeah, I'll throw it to you.
It's super interesting though and fascinating, this part about like what fascinates me is how intelligent the body is, and how when we trust symptoms as the cause and effect, as you say, that how it like it these symptoms are actually trying to fix themselves. It's the body trying to repair, it's the body trying to make you
Hmm.
survive, like biologically, and
Hmm.
how it's tailored to the psyche. Because we could go into that a little bit, like the difference between, because I've read quite a few books on immunologically, like how your immune system responds to your thoughts, and Joe Dispenza does that through like meditations, and we all probably have some sense of understanding how we can shift our frequency and our emotions by how we talk to ourselves. So but this is like more intertwined with the body and with that biological response. Like those, I saw those brain scans with little red
Hmm.
dots, actually the different layers of the brain, and it's just it's super fascinating. Like we could probably talk examples as well, like so many things that come down to like the basics of human suffering, like feeling
Hmm.
feeling alone, feeling isolated,
Hmm.
not being able to provide. Like there's so many things
Hmm.
that all of us probably likely feel at some point in our life.
Hmm. Hmm.
And but how we interpret it and how it affects which of the, I struggle with understanding. I'm kind of into that the layers of the brain and
Hmm.
layers, and that I've kind of resonated quite a while with how we don't um contaminate each other, but it's more that we pick up that frequency, or it resonates because we have an active conflict.
Hmm.
This is probably going deep for people that have no idea about what this, but I think some people will resonate as well. And if I'm going to put the links below to like see, there's lots of YouTube videos on German new medicine, and see this in terrain theory versus germ theory, and
Hmm.
consensus today is like I have pre-med, like first year of med school, and then I went over to public health and preventional medicine, and like communication and all that in my education, and every single illness, there was always in the medical consensus, there's always this, but we don't really know, it's genetics or it's
Hmm. Hmm.
environment, or where does it come from. But this system, it's based on natural law, like
Hmm.
it's unfallable. I explain it to people, it's like after spring summer comes, it's like that's a natural law because it always happens. Of
Hmm.
course it happens in different degrees, and within the
Hmm.
biological organism of a human, it will have different various symptoms depending on how you interpret, like how you feel, because it is related to your emotions as well, right? If you feel,
More about your perception. The emotion is the result of the perception. So
yeah,
there's a connection, but yeah.
yeah, but how do we distinct, and how do we resolve? And like I was listening to the video of that, I don't remember her name, her a doctor, German new medicine 101 or something on YouTube. I think it actually was
Melissa Cell.
yeah.
Hmm.
And she said that how do we some of them can be fatal, like if we have
Hmm.
conflicts for a long time. And how do you go
Yep.
about that part where you if you have, for me, I have a I think I have active conflict or have had, but I think I resolve it and then I go back. Is that like chronicle or is it?
Yeah, that's what we call a hanging healing, which would be chronic.
Yeah.
So what's the question you want me to focus on? Is how to resolve? Where do you want me to go? Because I could go a lot of different directions.
Yeah, well, the resolving is probably the interesting part because for me it's like it's stuck with a lot of narratives, but I know that the narratives aren't that important, but they're also a part of the psyche and
Hmm.
safety and stuff like that. There's so many layers
Hmm. Yep.
up and the
Okay, let's start with that. So first I'll explain there's 5 laws in German medicine. And the second law, the first law is at before any symptom, there's a shocking event that occurs in the psyche, then hits the brain, then hits the organ. It's called the iron rule of cancer, even though it doesn't just apply to cancer. The second law is the law of 2 phases. So this explains a little bit more about the resolution process. When you have a shocking event, first there's those 3 criteria you have to meet. You're overwhelmed, you're isolated, and there's some sense of shock or being caught on the wrong foot. The isolation can also be emotional, it doesn't have to be physical. So when those 3 hit at once, think about in our evolutionary history, you're likely to die. That's like a tiger jumping out from the bush and about to kill you. And if you're alone, the odds of you surviving that is very small. So your body, its goal is what? Survive, reproduce. So in shocking moments like that, has these SBSs, significant special biological programs that allow or that give you a kind of like a super sense or allow you to adapt in a certain way to survive. They have SBSs that will temporarily blur your vision in the front of your eyesight to illuminate your periphery so you can find an escape route. They have ones that will turn on cell proliferation in the nose so you can temporarily smell a little better because you're sensing danger around a corner. You will constipate if you're holding on to a morsel that you can't digest. In nature, it would be like if you ate a stone. Your body goes, well, if we pass that right away, that would damage ourselves. We don't do anything to intentionally damage ourselves. So I'm going to constipate, create more uh, uh, uh,
oh,
intestinal cells, more acid, so there'll be cell proliferation, more stomach acids, more intestinal, digestive juices until it gets broken down. And then once it's broken down, which emotionally is typically an emotion, or it
or
could
the
be an
tissue is
experience.
thick enough to pass it out without if it's like a heavy stone, you're probably just gonna have to make the proliferation of the cells thick enough to handle it.
Well, it makes it thicker, but it also, the more intestinal cells you have, the more juice those cells can produce.
Yeah,
So you can actually create more enzymes and acids and all these things.
all
So,
in movement. It's all dynamic. The whole
mhm,
biology. People are stuck in like, oh, I have this issue. I can't do anything about it. Yes, you can.
mhm, mhm.
Oh,
Yeah. And see,
oh,
we have a unique difference with humans and animals is we're the only species that can turn on an SBS, special biological program, figuratively in a response to something figurative versus literal. So if I ate a stone, it's just going to turn on a DHS because my body needs to adapt, constipate, break it down, pass it safely. But I can have an experience, let's say, of betrayal or of injustice that I can't digest. I've accepted it's happened, so it's not going to be on my upper digestive tract where things are just coming into my experience, physically, but also metaphorically. But it's at the very tail end. It's a very shitty situation. We use biological language all the time, and it's usually connected to some form of, let's say, injustice, betrayal, some event or experience I cannot eliminate. So if it's ruminating in my psyche and I literally can't eliminate the experience, the thought, what that person said, what they did, then I'll turn on the same program that I would if I were to eat a stone because my body doesn't know the difference. As long as those criteria are met, programs are going to turn on. So this is what's unique. This is why there's no chronic issues in the animal kingdom. They're not going in and out of chronic stuff. Now they might have, you know, uh, cancer or something like this, but again, our in German medicine, our understanding of cancer is totally different. Uh, it's always serving a purpose. It's not something to be scared about. Cancer, especially when it's spreading, what they call spreading, is typically a healing phase, not a conflict active phase. But you get so shocked, and then you put them on chemo, and then you starve them, then you isolate them in a hospital. You're creating so many conflicts on top of conflicts on top of conflicts that typically they die just from a lack of energy.
I
And
remember in that pre-med school, professors, doctors teaching us that the medicine kills more people than cancer. They
yeah,
said it. They
exactly.
said it openly, and this was in
Yeah.
2014. They
Hmm.
said, try our best to not give it, but this is the best to our knowledge.
Hmm.
Like how they admit it. I was shocked. I was like, what the?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's insane.
So with that understanding of the two phases essentially are there's a shocking event that meet those criteria, then you turn conflict active, which is the adaptation phase. In conflict active phase, you'll have cold hands, cold feet. You'll be restless, maybe some trouble sleeping. Typically higher energy though, cortisol, adrenaline. And most people are conflict active a lot, especially in modern society with job and money and
I
the
was today.
yeah, everyone, and it's normal. It's okay to be conflict active from time to time. We can't avoid that. It's when it becomes a chronic way of living, typically the result of living unbiologically, which we can talk about that in a moment. But so I just want to define these phases so then we know what we're even resolving, right? So we have conflict activity. Now let's say the conflict was an experience of injustice that you can't digest or let go of, that fits the three criteria: unexpected, shocking, overwhelming, and isolating. So let's say you catch your partner cheating on you, or someone suddenly leaves you, or something like this, right? Like this, and they don't even tell you why. It's like, this is so unjust. I can't eliminate this. I can't accept it. I can't digest it. Very simple. The opposite of that experience is the resolution.
Yeah.
So this is not that helpful because then you ask the question, how do I do that? But it's like digesting the experience, being able to let it go is how you digest it. Now, if you find yourself in a relationship, because this context is a relationship, in a relationship that is 10 times better than that one you previously had, and you no longer want to be with that person, and you feel like, oh, this had to happen for me to have something even better, typically that's enough where you're just going to resolve without it ever even making the conflict conscious. That's called just moving on with life. And this is how people will end up getting conflict active and healing. And they don't even know what's going on. This is not usually what happens to most people, though. Usually they end up repeating a kind of pattern over and over and over if it impacts them strong enough, right? So we go, indigestion, I can't accept the experience. So what's the solution? Digest it, accept it, let it go. Okay, now the question is, and now this is different for different conflicts. If let's say if I lose my territory as a man, my territory as a man is anything I consider mine. So if I lose let's say my work, reclaiming my territory, going to, you know, create a business or do whatever, get a job, whatever it is, that will typically solve that specific territory conflict. So this is when people say this work in GNM is not just psychological, it's also biological. Meaning it's biological for a man to produce a territory, to create a territory. That's what he ties his biological value to. And then his psyche is, okay, now I want to give all of that away to a woman because she's my territory and I'm wired to provide for her and protect her so that we can reproduce. So that's the biological solution. We go, that's what it looks like. Now the question is, what's in the way? What's in the way of the conflict activity? Okay, I've lost my territory, or I can't digest this. And it's opposite: regain your territory, digest the experience. And that in between is what I call a context or a core identity. And that's where my work differentiates from a lot of German New Medicine practitioners is they'll just tell you, well, this is the biological solution. Go get another job, right?
Yeah.
Or, it be this way with your partner and negotiate this. Or if you have a noisy neighbor and now you have territory anger and now you're having a little indigestion and acid reflux, go talk to that neighbor or move. It's very physically based. Now, we don't neglect the physical part. We just go, let's start with the identity. What's in the way of digesting the event? What's the identity? that says maybe I need to hold on to it. Because if you're not changing it, you're choosing it. So it's like, what is, if I'm holding on to this, it must be in my best interest to not let this go. I need it. I need to hold on to the injustice. Maybe I think it's going to keep me safe. I'm going to avoid it happening again. It's going to keep me from feeling hurt. So we have to dissolve the need for the conflict and the identity in between, which could be I'm not enough, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm this, I'm that. It's usually an I am or I am not. We have to dissolve that, and then they can start making different biological choices. And that's how we resolve. And it's very specific for each person and their conflicts.
Yeah, and this is the gold where you bring in the icy, you used to call it self inquiry, but now it's
Yeah. Somatic, integrated somatic inquiry, just somatic inquiry for short.
yeah. So that's more like how you combine those two tools to go
Hmm.
even deeper into the psyche and see the primal or the biological need and the story and like the whole. I love that. I love that. I've been using that a lot on myself, that tool,
Hmm.
and just how we can see and cut to to the truth of
Hmm.
what's actually present. Like there's so many bullshit stories in
Hmm.
myself included at times, and and yeah, especially that identity part as well. And as I understood, the biological territory for a female will be their children and their home.
Hmm. Hmm.
That part will always be activated or an active conflict if ever they feel threatened. And in today's modern society, where both parents usually have to have work to provide for their kids. So females, myself, for me, I can speak for myself. I feel like I'm in active conflict in that all the time because I always have to choose between working and caring for my kids because I know
Hmm.
there's some people that manage and have enough income from one of them. But most people don't. A lot of people don't, at least.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
just because housing and everything and prices and things are whack,
Hmm.
especially the
Hmm.
last years, like everything's just skyrocketed. So how would you recommend like women in the modern society to balance that? You becoming a father soon as well. Like what's
Yeah, that's great. So first of all, it's not a bad thing for women to go temporarily into a more biologically male hormonal status. All that really means is there'll be some territorial conflict that will temporarily kind of shut down the female side. So estrogen will lower, testosterone will rise, but that's a form of manic depression. But a lot of times the manic depressed is not, if it's not too intense, people actually feel really good. They have a lot of energy, their testosterone's really high, they're really functional.
I've always been comfortable in my masculinity. And guess what happened in our house? My husband had a heart attack 2 years ago. He had another. He didn't have one now, but we had a little shock. And he's been at home more with the kids, and I've been working more and providing. So we kind of automatically
This is nature's balance.
yeah.
That's nature's
So
balance. So it's like as long as those two are coming together in whatever ratio, it's fine. It's a perfect design.
yeah,
God designed
so
nature
intelligent.
way. Yeah,
So
where it's like, oh, if I'm if there's like if I'm in a conflict shock, and let's say my testosterone lowers a little bit and I'm slightly more feminine, I'm going to be attracted to the opposite because those two coming together creates order,
yeah,
and that's what you want. So it's all good to go, it's like if a man leaves to war, that woman might have a sexual frustration conflict, feeling like they're not safe,
yeah,
or even territory loss. It's not uncommon for women to relate to their man as their territory as well. So it's like they may have a temporal conflict from that, but it actually raises their testosterone, gives them more energy, so now they can provide the territory. So that's super intelligent. That's a good thing. Now where you want to the relationship you want to have with it though is one that is more lucid, where you can go, I notice what is happening. And if I want to be feminine or feel feminine or experience myself as more feminine, I can also go into that by number one, understanding what femininity is, but also choosing it. And sometimes something as simple as I'm going to go take a bath and relax and get into a relaxing, open, feminine posture is enough to actually start to downgrade the conflict of I have to provide, and to become more feminine. Even if the hormones don't change, they often do, but even if they don't, you can choose to live that way anyway. And that's the real power of this kind of work as well, when it comes to relationships.
Like, absolutely. I have proof of that actually, because I've had like a little high, slight and high of testosterone, like lots of my life after I became a mother. And especially I've had the cyclical, more of a masculine do action oriented, go and get the job and do stuff and get an education and blah blah blah. And when I've had those periods, I had blood tests, have a little heightened. And then
Mhm.
after, when I've been postpartum, and when I've chosen, as you say, to just like, oh, I am embracing my femininity and I love being a woman and being a safe haven for my kids, and I've gone into a blood test, and my those feminine estrogen and what is the other name?
Progesterone.
Yeah, those are higher, and the
Yeah.
testosterone is lower. So
Yeah. There you go.
I'm on board that you can absolutely shift those, and I think this highly intelligent wheel of the whatever creator Jesus, we've got to get into Jesus, and we got to get a little bit into astrology as well, because that's like, yeah, I think it's so awesome, this highly intelligent creator, God, source, call universe, call it whatever you want. But there is something a lot more intelligent than us that
Hmm.
is putting things in places and just creating that
Yeah.
nuance balances between the duality. And I think like everything is based on duality in this frequency, in this matrix reality that we're living in. But also I think the consciousness and the evolution is always going and ongoing. And I think that we're embracing a lot more totality as
Hmm.
well, and seeing these balances as a natural part of our evolution, but also harmonizing them more. Yeah. What is your take on Jesus and the
Hmm.
creation?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting how it all ties in with German medicine too, is if you stay in the German New Medicine paradigm, you might end up being a naturalist, even though Dr. Hammer was a theist. He believed in a God, but I think he was a little more agnostic in the sense that it wasn't real defined. It was just, yeah, there must be a God. But naturalism says nature, everything can be explained by the natural world. And that is what's interesting, is that's not necessarily untrue, but it's only true about the natural world. So it's like, yeah, within the natural world, science can explain nearly everything that takes place within the natural world. That's true. And
Material world, right?
what was that?
The material world.
Yeah, the material world. Yeah. Now, then you have to ask the question, well, what created the material world? And for naturalists, it's like the material world did, or nothing did, or some form of matter did
What
that.
is nothing?
Right.
Nothing doesn't exist.
Exactly. Exactly. So it ends up not making total sense. And things like, well, the laws of nature that produced ended up, according to, because this is also very materialist, ends up producing minds and consciousness. You are putting mind and consciousness after matter. And then you have to ask the question, how can I prove there's such a thing as matter without mind or consciousness? If I were to say to you, hey, go show me the matter without being able to be conscious of that matter, without having a mind to perceive things, how can you prove to me matter came before mind and it's an impossible event.
Yeah, I just had this conversation with my brother like last week because
Yeah.
he's very nature science, like materialistic. And
Yeah.
but I got him on board when we
Uh-huh.
saying exactly that what you were saying right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it can't answer hard questions. It could answer questions about the material world. Now, then you have to ask the question, okay, well, for example, with GNM, the five biological laws, those aren't inerrant in the sense that there are examples of people being healed or healing happening where it doesn't follow the biological laws. It's like people, let's say, like in a church, they put their hand over them, they say, in Jesus' name, you can now open your eyes and you can see. And all of a sudden, They're blind and now they can literally see. They don't go through a healing phase. People's bones coming back together. There's been tumors on scans that disappear within a minute or two. And in GNM, it's like, no, the bacteria is going to digest those cells and it would take at least, 8 week, like 4 or 8 weeks or something like this, depending on the size of it. So it's like we have these examples of what we might call supernatural, above the natural laws that we can observe, which sometimes is why it's so nuanced. Sometimes that's just because we don't understand the laws enough.
Hmm.
And so we go, oh, I don't understand this, must be supernatural. No, that's not it.
Yeah.
Because that's just we just don't have an understanding. This is what people have done about with viruses. Oh, something's causing this. I can't identify the virus. I can't fully isolate it. I can only see the cytopathic effect, but I can't isolate it before the cytopathic effect. So but it must be a virus. But what they're really saying is we don't understand. There's a process that's happening for sure. We think it's a virus, but because we don't understand it, we just kind of have to make something up called a virus.
I did lots of research on when I was going to vaccinate, or when they put the vaccination program on my kids or pushed it. I researched thoroughly virus vaccine or vaccines at all. And I figure, of all the research I read, I was like, I'm not giving, I gave them some of the bacterial vaccines because that was the best of my knowledge at the time, because they seemed pretty legit to my understanding. But virus vaccines, mm-mm. I'm like,
Hmm.
no, oh, hell no.
Hmm.
I don't see that. I don't see the evidence that this is any useful. Like after
Yeah,
all
good.
studies I read, I was like, viruses? What is it? Nobody knows what the
Yeah,
heck this is. It's just
exactly.
doesn't make sense.
Exactly. It's the boogeyman. I mean, it's like something did this. It's the invisible enemy trying to get you. It's essentially like the
It's
ego
alien
projected.
upgrades.
What was that?
I think it's alien upgrades or DNA upgrades
Well,
for
it's
bodies.
also, think about this, an invisible enemy trying to kill you. It sounds like the devil. It also sounds like the ego,
Yeah.
right? So it's like we fear things that we don't understand. So back to my point here is that there are exceptions to the laws, and we can call that supernatural, meaning they just don't actually they don't conform to the laws. And a good example of that is Jesus's life and resurrection. Nowhere in the biological laws is it's like, oh, the sixth law is that sometimes under these conditions, someone can resurrect, or can, completely in moments, this person's leprosy can disappear. No, in GNM, it would all get inflamed and the bacteria would digest all those dead cells, and then you'd have good rebuilt skin underneath. So why was Jesus able to do things that were supernatural and that weren't bound to the law? Because he's above the law,
Yeah.
right?
That's
It's
what
like I can heal you and you're not going to follow the laws because I want to show you that I'm not subject to the laws because I'm not your average dude, right? So go ahead.
it's the frequency of love. It's how high of a frequency of love and light you have integrated into your cells and into your belief system. That's what I think Jesus had. That's what I think that some people can heal. So we have a lot of stories. They're anecdotal, most of them, but still a lot of people from different places, different areas of the world that have experienced miracles and healing by
Hmm.
touch, by love, by belief. So that's,
Hmm.
I think that kind of proves that the spirit becomes before the, like mind over matter, the consciousness, the frequency becomes the predominant energy that
Hmm.
does the healing if we have enough love and light in us. But that's just my take on it.
Hmm.
Pray for
And
sure.
well, it's also Jesus when he went back to Galilee to heal, and people knew him from his childhood, and they didn't know him as the Messiah, and he started to put his hands on people to heal them. They wouldn't heal, and but then he's in places that aren't his hometown, and they hear, oh, he's the Messiah and this and that, and then they heal. So it's like it's a both and. He has this authority because of who he is to create or induce this state of healing, but they also have to have faith or belief. They have to be, in other words, they have to be in agreement to it, right? And then healing happens. And so why Jesus is so important to me is because it's not about a belief system, it's about a person who demonstrates the nature or character of God in a way we can understand and relate to. So instead of just having a relationship to the infinite, which isn't necessarily a relationship, it is, but it takes two to be in relationship. So God, I don't believe God is a floating man with a beard. So you have this infinite beingness, I am that I am. And if God is truly infinite, well, all forms of God are going to be expressed uh, to the fullest simply because that's what the infinite would do. Meaning, if there's an infinite version, there's going to be a finite version. But the finite version isn't actually finite in the sense that it doesn't take away from the infinite. It doesn't carve out a space. It's like if I had an infinite color blue, it doesn't carve out a little space and limit God. It's both. It can be both. And this is why the Trinity, I think, is important because the Trinity says three in one. But if we really look at everything, there's a multiplicity, there's billions that are one. So what the Trinity says is you're as long as you have a body of some kind, you're going to experience relationship. And in fact, there can't be an experience of time and space without having a body. So as long as I'm in time and space, I'm going to be in relationship. So why Jesus is significant is, well, I'm going to give you the perfect relationship with me. And no, there's no one else that can be a perfect. I mean, they're sure there can be two perfect God people, but what would be the use of having two? It's like path of least resistance. I'm going to be the most clear, loving example embodiment of the nature of God in a way that we can actually relate to and understand, because that opens up the door to the love of God in a way that being in a body can actually interpret, right? So
That's true.
you have a human being going, a human that's fully God going, I'm going to predict my own death. I'm going to predict that for exactly 13 pieces of silver, I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to tell you exactly how this is going to go. And I'm going to count on you being the betrayers that you are. I'm going to count on you attacking me, hurting me, judging me, because that's what they were all already doing energetically to God, right? So now he took on the actual form, played out the play, and said, "Go ahead and do all of that to me," because he's the ultimate mirror. This is
Yeah.
why people love and or hate Jesus. So he's the ultimate mirror. But if you hate him and attack him, his response to you is, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And so it's an absolute demonstration that no matter who we are towards God, it doesn't shake God's love for us. And when that touches us first, we can then reciprocate it. And that's the first commandment of Jesus: love God with all your heart. But you can't will someone, you can't just tell someone, love God. It's like,
Yeah.
especially if they're in suffering, they're going to be like, screw
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah, that's the key about how we have to actually reach up for it and make that commitment to the higher power, to love, to Jesus, and reach for it, because we are the one that creates the walls between it. When
Yeah,
we're suffering, we are the one
yeah.
that puts up the barriers, so God can't, or God can always reach us and is always with us. But
Mhm.
we believe that we are alone. We believe that we are
Right.
taken. We believe that we're not worthy, and that's when we push up, and then
Mhm.
we create the illusion that we're in suffering.
Yeah, yeah. And what's so interesting about the reaching bit is, it's both and, right? It's like I need to be willing and open. That's my job, is to open my heart. But God said, it's like, and I'm, turning God into a person that could say that something, but I'm just doing this to communicate. But it's like God said, actually, I'll come down to you. I'll stoop all the way down to you. I'll in, create an imago, which is a Greek word for body. So I'll put me into a body so I can actually go all the way into the darkest part of the human psyche basically and meet you there and bring my light to you. So you don't have to travel and ascend to me. I'll come all the way down to you. And then if that, yeah, there we go. If the act of that, which is the gospel, if that pierces your heart, then the side effect is that you then outpour love. And we can call that raising your frequency if you'd like. But the I've just seen this so much with people that take that out of context. They start to think they can earn God's
Yeah.
love through raising their frequency. And then they get so focused. I need to raise my frequency. And then it becomes, oh, I can't be negative. I can't do this. I can't. And that's actually a negative limiting thing. And that's the same thing as a works-based religion, meaning I gotta do right, I gotta pray hard, I gotta earn my way. And that's already coming from lack,
Ego.
separation, fear. And so that's just another way that we get tricked into, I have to do it myself. And actually, no, we have to come to the end of ourselves where we think it's our job to do that so we can actually receive the inheritance of God's love.
It's pretty intense, pretty profound. It's pretty magical.
But let
Um,
me just say this. The reason I am bringing all this together now with German medicine is because the Jesus does a couple things. He'll reflect back to you where you argue with God about who you really are. And everything you project on him is typically going to be the things you eventually project on your partner, the world, your enemies, whatever it might be. Eventually, you'll project it on them too. And so he's this mirror, but he's also this permission slip, this doorway, this access point to um, seeing who you are in God's eyes. That has to, if the love is able to actually penetrate you, which for me it was back in last year, towards the beginning of the year in my apartment, when I had a really powerful encounter with Christ. When that love pierces you, for wow, I've been trying to do it my own way. I've been prideful. I've had addictions. It's like all the things that keep me from experiencing the fullness of my authentic being. Um, when I stop trying to purify or prove myself or get there or whatever it might be, and I realized actually you came to do that for me, and I didn't have to do anything or earn it, and you would have came if it was just me on the planet. If it was just me on the planet, you would have done the same thing. And I could be one of those people that put you on the stake, and you would still, like, it's literally that unshakable. And the suffering that you went through, you dying so I can find life now. In life, we could call that spiritual life. There's such an immense amount of love that repentance, which really just means to change your thinking and then your actions, is automatic and effortless. It's not from a place of, I have to be a good boy, do it right. No, it's, wow, I'm so loved and I feel so cherished by God
Share it.
that I now want to follow these commandments because all the commandments are this is who you would be if you were unconflicted. This is the natural state when you're unconflicted. So it's like you want to do that too as an act of appreciation and
Yeah.
devotion and love, not from force or limitation or I'm bad or I have to avoid going to hell or any of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the path. And it's interesting because this exact statement, this storyline, this is super resonate and it's super resonated with astrology as well. Like this is like the essential of what I learned through astrology too. And people think that like astrology is the devil and blah blah blah. But it's just a tool.
And let me mention something on that. What makes something, it's not that it's the devil, but what makes something, when we're out of right relationship with something is when it becomes a crutch or if we treat it as if it's God, meaning it has more authority than God. And there's subtle ways that we can do that. For example, if I sat down with a psychic and they said, next week, your wife's going to break up with you. And I take that as gospel. I'm like, that is true. And what I'm saying is this human being has authority over my life. So now I'm completely discounting God that created that human being and me, right? So in that moment, I discount God and I replace God with this person. Now I can do that with a tool. I can do that with anything. So I just have to honestly check myself and go, man, if I'm going to yoga because it's the only way I'm going to be saved and ascend and be enlightened, and this is the only way is through this physical act, I am making that physical act into something that it's not designed to be. Because what will happen as soon as I'm done with the physical act, well, I'll lose all that stuff. And then I go back and get more. And then see, now I'm in this loop, and we can get in healing loops or whatever addictions. And that it just never works.
I've been that with yoga. I've been like self-criticizing myself because I haven't been able to do it 6 times a week and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
But then I have this understanding, as you have as well, apparently, like just it's not about our value isn't in what we do, it isn't in what we
Right.
it's in our being. So it doesn't really matter
Hmm.
as long as we got that relationship straight with our heart and with the highest source of love. It's good. Everything else is just a tool. And if you prefer to
Hmm.
do it because it brings you joy and it brings you excitement, then
Hmm.
go ahead. But if you value
Hmm.
it before, that's why I'm super cautious with like predictional astrology and stuff like that.
Hmm.
We can talk about a little bit themes, but the spectrum of it, it's like it can manifest in so it's infinity the ways it can manifest
Hmm.
well. So it's more about like topics and about self recognition and about the underlying energetic as I see astrology,
Right.
a map of some of the underlying energies that's with us. And I think
Hmm.
God placed it there. So it's
Hmm.
be through the highest lens, but again, not interpreting the smaller minds in myself or in others as any absolute truth. It always has
Hmm.
to be activated through excitement and joy and love because that's
Hmm.
something the highest, in my opinion.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So what do you know about your I've had a little mini reading about you before. You probably had some astrology readings, but
Hmm.
you're just in between. You have like a Aquarius stellium, and a stellium that means like that you have lots of planets in one sign.
Okay.
Aquarius is like people think that it's the water bearer, that it has this water thing, but it's actually intellectual. It's actually a air sign. And
Mm.
like Santa Claus, and
Hmm.
to go into all of that, but it's actually not water, it's actually wisdom. So it is
Mm.
rebellion, innovative, um,
Mm.
challenging the status quo, just
Hmm.
doing its own thing, being an individualist. And you
Hmm.
have your sun actually in Pisces, but it's only in 2 degrees. So it's really influenced by that Aquarian energy. And also Pisces is like the totality of everything. So like extreme sensitivity, extreme compassion, extreme understanding for the collective, all that. And you have it in the house of like taboo and trauma and shadow work. So I
Oh,
know that
wow.
you've done your fair share of all of that. And then you also have this emotional side that's very communicative, but it's also very because your moon is in Libra, and Libra is like the balancing of the scales. So you're also very like
Mm.
stable emotionally, but also able to communicate your emotions in a very like maybe indecisive at times, but a very like balanced emotional
Mhm.
status. And then you have this Leo rising, which is like the noble leader, the heartfelt leader that's here to like show people how to choose their heart and the love for the
Mhm.
just be bold and brave and be like a leader type or an entertainer type or yeah. So that was
Mhm.
like shortly broken down the big three and
Mhm.
eight topics, and then you can elaborate on how that or if that resonates with
I
you.
mean, that totally sounds like me in so many ways. Like, yeah, I've always been literally since I remember since middle school, um, being like, okay, the system, this education, I mean, and then at the freshman year in high school, I watched this film called Zeitgeist, where it shows about, how
I remember that movie.
yeah, yeah, where it shows how the Rockefellers, own the education system and how it changed. And it was like I started a club because I was like, I got to inform people. This is, so I've always had this counterculture kind of rebellious side and also the leadership role, on like team sports. I was usually like the most inspirational. I'd give the team speeches or as team captain. Like that was always a natural role for me. So yeah, this is it's very, yeah, it resonates a lot.
Yeah, and that's also where you get your biggest healing in that being a leader and showing
Mm.
how to connect with their heart. And you also have this Aries, which is like the first and the best, like the elbows that just like they want to get their things out there.
Mhm.
That's the energy in your higher wisdom and higher mind and belief
Mm.
system. So like being a
Mhm.
pioneer in that area is like, yeah,
Mm. Mhm.
totally see that. It's very, very interesting. Also, like, yeah, somewhat shifts in your housing, and because Pluto is in your fourth house in Scorpio, so it's an extra energy on that, on transformational. How is it with things? Does things get broken in your house a lot, in your home?
Mm.
Practical, like doorknobs and like,
Not recently. I feel like I had a stage where that might have happened, but not recently.
oh, maybe you transcended that, because that's
Mhm.
like that's been like a super um physical manifestation of that for me, and a lot of
Mm.
people talk to it with Pluto in the fourth house, but it can also just mean like super phoenix rising in the home and healing that ancestral wounds from like generation,
Mhm.
like really owning that. So yeah,
Mhm.
or where you're at. And beautiful, beautiful combo. It's been an honor. I think I don't want to go too deep into the astrology because I'm trying to keep it like a little bit sun, moon, and rising, but yeah, there's a lot of things going on for us as well though, with we can go a little bit into like transformate. There's going to be major trend, not to be predictive, but a little
Mhm.
bit predictive, major transformations in relationships the next 20 years, but you also have a lot of your planets there in the seventh house of the other, so like lots of empathetic and lots of understanding for your
Mhm.
partner or your business partner. But a lot of that will have even more phoenix rising energy for you, most likely the next 20 years, and a lot of well, yeah, well, we're in winter now, and with the Mars retrograde, Mars is like the planet of action and masculinity and doing stuff, so it's a little bit like more
Mhm.
inward, and with the 12th house being like subconscious beliefs and all that, so
Mhm.
probably happening some stuff in that area, but it's going to be a lot smoother from June. That's when all the planets go directed. All the planets, all the generational planets are shifting this year, so it's going to be super new era, super new beginning.
Mm.
For everything's shifting, and for the better. We are choosing that. I hope that a lot of people choose love over fear. I think I can end it at that. And if you want to share a little bit where people can find you, your offerings, and if you have any comments on that astrology, you can have the last word.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see how all that plays out. And in terms of finding me, I'm most active on Instagram, so just brandon.bozarth. My website is brandonbozarth.com. And we have the third round of the circle starting February 22nd, so in about 30 days. And there's a link in my bio on Instagram for that to apply. That's where we go from everything from this core identity, which is who am I? What is God? What is the source of suffering? What's the source of happiness? What's the source of value and purpose? So, all those big questions that form our identity, that then give us a lens of perception on how we perceive certain shocking moments, which determine the chronic issues that we experience. And then the inquiry is how we undo all of that and come back to our original design, or I could say our biological design. So that's all included in the circle, plus a bunch of client sessions, resolution stories, and a deep dive into the 5 laws of German New Medicine. So you could find a video talking about that curriculum and the experience, link in my bio on that page.
I'm going to put
And,
the links below on the.
okay, great. And I think that's all I got. And then just thank you again for having me.
Such an honor, such an honest, such an amazing convo, and I think the listeners are going to enjoy this. It's radical and it's innovative and it's new, but it's time. We need to shake things up because they're not working
Mhm,
well.
mhm,
That's like the definition of paradigm shift. When things
mhm,
work a lot better and enough people know about them, they'll just
mhm.
choose the better option, the path of
Totally.
distance. So yeah, the circle, I'm excited. It's so cool. I actually met a Norwegian girl through your page that's actually well known in Norway. I checked out her page and she was like, lots of my fellow people that I know online in Norway. And I'm like, what? How does she? That's so funny with the digital age.
Cool.
Like just meet up and share our wisdom.
Hmm.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. And we'll
Thank you,
see you,
Christina.
see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.